Now, let's check out the next film from POPSUGAR.
Thanks to Lapo, our next filmmaker, Nikki Sun, is an on-camera personality and freelance producer, director, cinematographer, content strategist, and editor. And she's passionate about people, filmmaking, and technology. So for the last decade, she's been amplifying marginalized voices both in front of and behind the camera, specifically spotlighting Asian American talent on screen and women and Black and Indigenous and people of color filmmakers behind the scenes. So I'd like to introduce you to filmmaker Nikki Sun, who will tell us a little bit more about herself. Hey, Nikki.
Hi, Lindsay. It's so great to be here with you and Sawyer. Just a little bit more about my background. Yes, I've been privileged to work in media for the past decade. And the one thing I would say about that is I've built my own channel from the ground up myself. Don't really have a traditional media background, so I'm very much of a self-starter, but I work both in professional or traditional and non-traditional forms of media, starting off at a television station, producing and hosting and interviewing for shows. And over the years, I realized that, as a one-woman band, there's so much that happens behind the scenes that didn't really get showcased on my personal channel. So I started another channel called Technically Speaking, which is a play off of my name and the pun technically speaking, and to really help educate and provide information and knowledge and a behind the scenes look of what goes on with the cameras that I use, the gear that I use, and hopefully at the same time make it more comfortable for people in BIPOC and Asian American communities, especially also women, to feel comfortable that they can do and pursue this career too, because it's very male dominated. But I think it's about time that we add our voices and shift and really call on our male allies to allow us to have a conversation to expand our perspective. So being selected for this filmmaking project means a whole bunch to me. And I really thank Samsung and POPSUGAR for allowing me to shoot my first film entirely on the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE 5G phone. It was such an amazing experience, and I'm so excited for you to see what I did with it.
Well, the outcome is beautiful. So now let's go ahead and check out our third film, which is Nikki Sun's Eslo, Love in the Time of COVID.
I always imagine like, oh, if I date someone, I'm gonna date this person for like 2 years and then maybe I'll think about marriage and then we'll take those steps slowly. But then dating Esther, I saw that like that timeline can easily change, especially in 2020. Hi, I'm Paulo.
And I'm Esther.
And we're engaged.
And together we make Eslo.
Or Paulster.
But we like Eslo.
Sure, we like Eslo.
We met through a media company. I thought Paulo was super loud and obnoxious and flirty.
A lot of like, good job, like you're a great person, And then in 2019, I came to the US to work with a production company that I'm at right now. My boss, he told me, hey, why don't you think about Esther? Now you're here in the US, you need to find love.
Because he's Brazilian, because I'm American, there are differences. So being able to learn together and like have those conversations have been really helpful. He brings a very different perspective.
In the beginning, I thought she was like interested, but she wasn't. So I just kept being very optimistic, like, hey, let's go out, let's do this. Eventually, I just kept on insisting, and then she started to open her heart too. And then on Christmas Eve, I kind of like told her like, hey, I like you. And I held her hand without like sort of telling her. I knew that she was interested because if I held her hand and she didn't back away, then I think that she also had the same feelings.
I think for us early on, even before COVID hit seriously, we had like loosely and lightly talked about marriage. Dating for a month in COVID feels like dating for 6 months. So it felt like it had escalated because we were spending so much time together. And the time was always like one-on-one. We started cooking a lot because we were eating at home every day.
It's been a good time to experiment. I don't think we would be able to like cook this much together if we weren't in quarantine or in lockdown. Like after 2 months, we already felt like we were dating for like almost a year. Like, oh my goodness, we know each other so well already in such a short amount of time. Eventually, I was able to gather all the resources, all the friends to help me out, and I was able to propose to her on October 3rd. Last year, I was in Brazil. I didn't even imagine I was gonna come to the US. Everything worked out. I came, met Esther, COVID hit, and I'm like, okay, what's gonna happen in 2020? And so much has happened, so much has changed. Even though COVID isn't gone, we can go into the next year knowing that we have each other and we can get through it. And that's what's important.
It's really such a beautiful love story and so of this moment. Congratulations, Nikki. I just want to ask you, how do you think this year has changed the way in which viewers experience and engage with video and film?
I think it's more important than ever. And I think now that we're all video calling each other because we can't travel right now or see each other in person, our phones have been literally like, if it's not charged with me today, I ain't going anywhere, because I always feel like this allows me to be so attached to my family and my friends and the world, in such a feeling sometimes when we are alone and maybe isolated. So I think being able to showcase these stories through video, being able to connect with people through phone and video calls, it has allowed us to have a more authentic and closer connection with people. I think it's not weird to hop on a video call anymore with people. I think a lot of folks were like, I'm not going to be on video, but it's real. I think because we're all experiencing this very unusual time, there is more chance for being creative and how to stay connected during this time. And I'm so glad that phones allow us to do that, and it allows us to continue telling meaningful stories with the phone. So I think everybody being on their phones, video calling, watching content on their phones, it's made the viewing experience all the more crucial and important. So it's really nice to see like the Galaxy S20 FE play a role. It has definitely played a role in how I told my story today.
And, what was it about them that really impressed you the most when it came to the way they did respond to COVID-19 and the pandemic, as a couple and as individuals too?
I would say as a couple, their story and just asking them the questions that I did is very clear that communication is key, especially during this unusual time. I think for them, communication only improved when they were together. And as I was listening and observing how they were interacting as they were saying it during the interview, like I interviewed them for about 45 minutes and you only get to see 3 minutes, but like with the line of questioning that I did, there were other things that I wanted to showcase, like mannerisms, like how they care for each other, how they show up for each other, how they make each other feel listened and heard during this time. And I could tell immediately that they just have found each other through another form of communication. And that's really just listening and being able to adapt and be flexible, understanding, and being really patient during this time, but also being creative with their dates, right? I mean, it's beyond just communication at this point. It's every second matters. And, for them, dating for 1 month felt like 6 months. So it didn't surprise me that they ended up getting engaged. I was surprised because normally it takes more than a year personally for me to get to know someone. But I think dating in the time of COVID has really escalated a lot of relationships, and it has also ended a lot of relationships. But I'm so glad that they found each other. And what I would like to say is Apollo locked it down in lockdown. So that's really cool.
Put that on a coffee mug and you're good to go. I mean, that's one thing I really love about your project so much is this is a story about people. It's a story about love. Regardless of what people see about us on the exterior, this is about people connecting on the interior. And I think intimacy in it is really remarkable. Speaking of intimacy, that's hard to capture on big cameras. Coming from bigger format cameras, did you have any pleasant surprises? Anything when you were shooting with the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE 5G? Was there anything that you were like, oh, this is just nice, it's easier?
Absolutely. I'm so used to working with a myriad of different cameras. And normally when I'm shooting by myself or on crews, it's like you have these giant cameras that really have to keep swapping out the batteries every 2 hours. You need a whole film crew for lighting, sound, audio. And it was really nice to go in with the Galaxy S20 FE and just do it everything by myself. I mean, so comfortable being a one-woman band that having a phone such as the Galaxy S20 FE in my hands and being able to do all the things that I wanted to convey and showcase was incredible. For instance, it had 4K at 24 frames per second, which is a very cinematic frame rate for a cinematographers. They also had 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second at 4K. And being able to access the pro mode in the phone was also a pleasant surprise. And adding external audio was also another pleasant surprise. So they have made this phone really a delight and a joy for filmmakers like myself and other content creators to really feel like they can capture a film with the same cinematic quality as the normal cameras that we use nowadays. And on top of that, this is a camera that's accessible, easily accessible in your pocket. So you're thinking about, can I tell a story that's going to be, noteworthy when I'm at this restaurant or just going on a hike? Absolutely. And I hope that I was able to show that, yeah, you don't need fancy big equipment. The best camera is the camera that you have. And for a lot of us, it is our phones. And so being able to capture all these moments with a phone that would be comparable when utilizing big cameras, that was really exciting for me.
I've always said the best camera that you can have is the camera that is always on you so that you never miss a real moment. Something
Yes,
about this
facts.
project that really stood out to me was the individual point of view of you as a filmmaker. Tell me your own personal goals as a filmmaker, and then also what does it mean for you to be a woman and person of color in filmmaking? And is there anything you would like to see happen with your work? Is there anything that you would like to accomplish?
Absolutely. I think, starting out being more in front of the camera and interviewing a lot of Asian American artists, talent, entrepreneurs really sparked from the need to see more representation, to see someone like me doing this. I think when I started out, we had a thing called YouTube that allowed us to really put stories without having to get it cleared by networks. We were able to tell
Yeah.
our own stories. And I connected a lot with independent filmmakers because here were people who didn't see themselves in mainstream media who wanted to do something about it, who say like, hey, we exist, we live here, but yet we don't see faces like ours on screen. So it has been a mission for the past decade, not only to amplify marginalized voices, but also to take action to do it. And what I realized that when I'm in front of the camera, it's great. I have a voice. As an actor, great, but it's a script that I am waiting to be given. And I wanted to switch that narrative. It's like
Yeah.
storytelling. I want to be able to tell it from my perspective. I want to know how to edit. I want to know how to shoot because I want to know how to write because these are the people, the casting directors, the writers that are writing these stories to allow us to have multidimensional characters, not stereotypes continuously over and over as an Asian American male or female. So it was really important for me to switch and have this come to aha moment where I was like, if I want to change the way that we're portrayed, I need to be behind the camera. I need to tell the story the way that I want to. And really do it in a way that hopefully honors an authentic voice from my perspective, because every person's perspective is so different, even if you're in the same race or ethnicity. But speaking alongside to that, I do understand that being a woman and also a person of color in filmmaking is very hard. It's very rare. And there's so many that are pursuing this journey that are not getting the shine that they deserve. And what I want to do, especially with my tech channel, is to really highlight and spotlight these voices that I feel that are so important. And so for me, it was very important to tell a story that I would feel represented just a modern day couple. And I hopefully through this, we will be able to drop those labels in the beginning of saying that I'm an Asian filmmaker or that I'm a woman filmmaker. At the end of the day, I just want to be known as a filmmaker who tells authentic, amazing stories. And you're hiring me for that and not a diversity quota. So I really thank Samsung and POPSUGAR for finding me and giving me this opportunity to tell a story the way that I wanted to tell it.
Well, I commend you for that, but also for being the change that you wish to see. For making, I'm sure everyone out there, whether they identify with you or not, they hear your message and it's a true one. And it's one that I hope you have great accomplishments with. Taking some questions from our audience, we got one from Alana. She wanted to know what were some of the lighting tricks you used when filming? How were you able to pull off these nighttime shots? What was the trick behind that?
You know what's crazy is this is why I love the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE. It's like I didn't really need a lot of lights for the nighttime shots. Normally, I'm very hesitant in shooting at nighttime because I'm like, oh, the noise, the grain is going to be like super hard to fix in post. And the night mode and the night hyperlapse was actually really cool to shoot with. I kid you not, because obviously we try to get away with I don't want to be this is such a brand thing. But Esther and Paulo, I let them play with the phone to take selfies as I was just filming, and they were just really impressed, high key impressed with the quality of not needing a flash to get some of the night shots that we did. It was just a beautiful low light setting. The pro mode on the phone is amazing. I can adjust the ISO. I can adjust the aperture. I can adjust all these things that normally I wouldn't really have access to on a phone. These are kind of a filmmaker's dream and a content creator's dream, is being able to play with the depth of field and to play with all these other factors. So I think, lighting, I didn't really have to do much. It was actually the daytime scenes that I added light to just to give it more of a softer focus. But other than that, I didn't really have to use that much lights in the nighttime scene. I was very impressed by it.
Yeah, I was too. The low light is universally tricky when it comes to any camera, let alone camera on a smartphone. And I think they were some of the most beautiful images from the entire short film. Sebastian wanted to know, how did you decide to tell this story in particular? Was there anything else that you thought about, or why was this story special to you?
I think when I was starting to cast a couple, well, first of all, let's back up and let's be real personal here. I think in the beginning of 2020, we all set goals for ourselves. And to me personally, if I may be so bold to put it out there, this is not like a dating ad or anything. I'm just saying, I was like, okay, it's 2020. Maybe it's time that I open myself up to dating myself. And then the COVID hit. And I'm like, okay, how is this going to happen? Are we just waiting until 2021, 2022? And beyond just, love in the time of COVID, it's also about genuine connection. So while I did pick a couple that I felt like they met and, their relationship escalated because of COVID, I also wanted to tell a story of connection. So this is not just for singles out there or who want a love story during this time, because I think any story during this time is going to be oh, that's one for the books. That was 2020. I remember that. I think, again, it's just really focusing on the connection that you can find with somebody, because it's definitely a lot harder to do all the things that we're used to and find genuine connection. And honestly, in a way, COVID has made it more meaningful in a way. You're not just going to meet somebody, swipe left, swipe right, and meet them. It's did you take a test? Were you negative? Because if you didn't, this is not happening. And there's also a level of trust that you have to gain as well when you're dating, because you have to have some sort of trust in order to meet up, because you might catch COVID. Again, we want to catch feelings, not COVID.
Well, if we learned one thing, we learned if you stick two people in a house for 6 months, you will find out if they're soulmates or not. Thank you, Nikki, for joining us. I just had the best time here today. Lindsay, I'll let you take it away.
Oh my gosh, likewise. I'm just so excited for even more people to get the chance to see this film. It's such a breath of fresh air. Congratulations, Nikki, and thank you both.
Yes, thank you so much, Lindsay, Sawyer. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Oh my gosh, don't we all love in quarantine? That was super adorable. Thank you so much, Nikki and Lindsay, for joining us tonight.